Welcome to another descent into the shadows with angelical balance. If you're here to let the nightmares in, or simply crave a story that lingers long after the screen goes black, I have one small request. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, and drop a like. Your support is what keeps the darkness alive and helps more lost souls find these tales. Now, settle in. Dim the lights until the room feels too large. Let the outside world slip away. The desert has a way of making you feel small. After 6 months patrolling the I-70 corridor through eastern Utah, I'd learned that lesson well enough. My name is Daniel Reeves, and in the fall of 2019, I was a 28-year-old Utah Highway Patrol trooper assigned to the Emery County Beat, one of the loneliest stretches of interstate in America. Most people don't realize how empty Utah really is once you leave the cities. Sure, tourists flock to the national parks, but between those postcard-perfect destinations lie hundreds of miles of high desert, broken only by the occasional gas station or scattered ranch. The I-70 between Green River and Salina cuts through this emptiness like a scar, and for 12-hour shifts, that scar belonged to me. I'd taken the job for the usual reasons: steady pay, benefits, a chance to serve. Growing up in Provo, I'd always felt drawn to law enforcement, though nothing could have prepared me for the isolation of rural patrol work. My training officer, a grizzled veteran named Mackenzie, had warned me during my first week. Out here, you're on your own. Backup might be 40 minutes away on a good day. You learn to trust your instincts, or you don't last. September had been quiet, mostly routine traffic stops and the occasional stranded motorist. But as October arrived and the days grew shorter, something shifted. I couldn't put my finger on it at first, just a feeling like static electricity before a storm. It started with the abandoned vehicles. On October 3rd, I found a silver Honda Accord pulled onto the shoulder near mile marker 114, just past the exit for Goblin Valley. The driver's door hung open, keys still in the ignition, engine cold. A woman's purse sat on the passenger seat, wallet and phone inside. No signs of struggle, no broken glass, no blood. Just an empty car in the middle of nowhere. I called it in, ran the plates. The vehicle belonged to a Margaret Chen from Sacramento, California. 34 years old, traveling alone according to her hotel records. She'd checked out of a motel in Green River that morning, telling the clerk she was heading to Capitol Reef. She never arrived. Search and rescue combed the area for 3 days. They found nothing. No footprints leading away from the vehicle, no trace of her in the surrounding desert. It was as if she'd simply stepped out of her car and vanished into the air. Probably got disoriented and wandered off, my supervisor, Sergeant Hatch, said when I pressed him about it. Happens more than you'd think. Desert's unforgiving. We'll likely find her when turkey hunters head out in a few weeks. But they never did. 2 weeks later, mile marker 129, a blue Ford F-150, this time with the engine still running, driver's door closed but unlocked. The truck belonged to James Pritchard, a 61-year-old rancher from Loa. His coffee sat in the cup holder, still lukewarm. His wallet, his phone, his rifle in the gun rack, all there. James Pritchard was not. This time I was more thorough. I searched the immediate area myself before calling it in, looking for any sign of where he might have gone. The October sun beat down mercilessly as I walked the roadside, scanning the red dirt and scattered sagebrush. That's when I noticed something odd. About 30 feet from the truck, I found a single boot print in a patch of soft dirt. It was facing toward the road, as if someone had been standing there, watching. But the print was wrong somehow. Too deep on the toe end, the heel barely making an impression. like whoever made it had been standing on tiptoe or leaning forward at an impossible angle. I photographed it, marked it with a flag, and mentioned it in my report. The search and rescue team was less enthusiastic this time, their resources already stretched thin. They conducted a cursory search, found nothing, and the case joined Margaret Chen's in the growing pile of unexplained disappearances. "You're new, so you don't know," one of the SAR volunteers told me as they packed up. "This part of Utah, people go missing. They have for years. Could be exposure, could be falls, could be they just wanted to disappear. The desert keeps its secrets." I didn't like that answer, but I didn't have a better one. 3 more vehicles turned up over the next 2 weeks, each one following the same pattern. Pulled over cleanly, no signs of distress, occupants gone without a trace. The brass started getting nervous. The media caught wind of it, dubbing it the Phantom Driver case, speculating about everything from a serial killer to alien abductions. I worked overtime, driving the corridor multiple times per shift, eyes peeled for anything unusual. The desert landscape became hypnotic during those long hours. Endless red rock formations, twisted juniper trees, the occasional pronghorn antelope watching me pass with unblinking eyes. It was during one of these extended patrols, around 2 a.m. on October 28th, that I saw her. I was heading westbound near mile marker 119, my spotlight occasionally sweeping the shoulder, when my headlights caught a figure standing beside the road. I hit the brakes instinctively, my heart rate spiking. Someone out here on foot in the middle of the night was unusual enough to warrant immediate attention. I pulled over about 50 yards past the figure and radioed in my position, a habit that had become automatic after Mackenzie's warnings. As I stepped out of my cruiser, the cool desert air raised goosebumps on my arms. The temperature had dropped into the low 40s, and this person was just standing there, motionless. "Utah Highway Patrol," I called out, my hand resting on my service weapon. "Are you all right? Do you need assistance?" No response. The figure didn't move, didn't acknowledge me at all. I approached slowly, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. As I got closer, details emerged. It was a woman, maybe 30 years old, wearing jeans and a light jacket, not nearly enough for the cold. Her dark hair hung limp around her face, which she kept angled down, away from my light. "Ma'am, I'm Trooper Reeves. Are you injured? Is your vehicle broken down somewhere?" Still nothing. She stood there like a statue, arms at her sides, not shivering despite the cold. I was about 10 feet away now, close enough to see that her clothes were dusty but not torn, her hands empty. Something about the situation felt wrong, though I couldn't articulate why. My training kicked in, assess for threats, look for signs of intoxication or mental health crisis, maintain a safe distance. "Ma'am, I need you to respond. Can you hear me?" Her head tilted up slowly, mechanically, until her face caught my flashlight beam. What I saw made me take an involuntary step back. Her eyes were open, but wrong. The pupils were massively dilated, black pools that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. Her skin was pale, almost gray in the harsh illumination. But it was her expression that truly unsettled me. She wasn't looking at me exactly, more through me, her face utterly blank, devoid of any emotion or recognition. "Ma'am, have you taken any drugs? Are you on any medication?" I tried to keep my voice steady, professional. Her mouth opened slowly, and I expected words, maybe a cry for help. Instead, she made a sound I can still hear in my nightmares, a low, resonant hum, almost mechanical, like feedback from a speaker. It vibrated in my chest, made my teeth ache. I reached for my radio. "Dispatch, I need medical en route to mile marker 119, westbound. Possible 1144. Female appears to be in some kind of distress or altered mental state." The woman's head tilted to the side, that awful humming continuing. Then she took a step toward me, her movement jerky and uncoordinated, like she was operating her limbs manually, concentrating on each motion. "Ma'am, I need you to stop right there." My hand moved from my radio to my weapon, though I didn't draw it. "I'm going to help you, but I need you to stay where you are." She took another step, and another. Her eyes never blinked, never shifted focus from that middle distance point beyond me. The humming grew louder, and I swear I felt it resonating in my bones. I backed toward my cruiser, maintaining distance. This was wrong, all of it. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to get away from this woman. "Dispatch, expedite that medical. Subject is approaching, appears to be non-responsive to verbal commands. Behavior is highly erratic." The dispatcher's voice crackled back, professional and calm. "Copy 419. EMS is en route, ETA approximately 35 minutes. Can you maintain visual on the subject?" 35 minutes? I might as well have been on the moon. The woman stopped abruptly, about 5 feet from me. The humming cut off so suddenly, the silence felt oppressive. We stood there in the pool of my flashlight beam, the desert darkness pressing in around us, and I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then she smiled. It wasn't a human smile. Her lips pulled back too far, revealing teeth that seemed too numerous, too white. The expression held no warmth, no humor, just the mechanical approximation of what a smile should be. "Help," she said, her voice flat and effectless, as if she were reading the word from a card. "Help me." "I'm trying to help you," I said, my own voice embarrassingly shaky. "Medical assistance is on the way. Can you tell me your name?" "Help me," she repeated, exactly the same inflection, the same toneless delivery. Then she raised her arm, pointing past me, down the dark highway toward the west. I resisted the urge to look where she was pointing, keeping my eyes on her. What's out there? Is someone else injured? "Help me." The same words, like a recording on loop. My radio crackled. 419, we're getting reports of additional sightings. Multiple calls coming in from truckers reporting pedestrians on the highway between your location and mile marker 135. Can you confirm? My blood went cold. Mile marker 135 was over 15 miles away. "Negative, dispatch. I have one subject at my location. No other pedestrians visible." But even as I said it, I saw them. Emerging from the darkness beyond my headlight beams, more figures were appearing along the roadside. First one, then three, then too many to count quickly. All standing motionless, all facing the road. "Dispatch, disregard my last. I have multiple subjects, possibly 12 to 15 individuals on foot. They appear to be," I trailed off, because I didn't know how to describe what I was seeing. Standing along the highway, no movement, all appear to be in the same condition as my initial contact. The woman in front of me hadn't moved, her arms still extended, pointing west. Her smile remained fixed on her face, that horrible parody of human expression. "Help me," she said again. One of the other figures started walking toward the road, moving with that same jerky, uncoordinated gait. Then another started moving, and another. They were all converging on the highway, all heading in the same direction, west, toward wherever the woman was pointing. I made a decision. I backed quickly to my cruiser, keeping my flashlight trained on the woman. "Ma'am, I need you to sit down right where you are. Medical help is coming, but I need you to stay still." She didn't respond, didn't acknowledge my words at all. As I reached my vehicle, I grabbed my radio and switched to the emergency channel. "Dispatch, this is 419. I have a situation at mile marker 119 that requires immediate supervisor response and multiple backup units. I have approximately 15 to 20 individuals on foot, all displaying erratic behavior, all attempting to enter the highway. Requesting road closure and additional resources immediately." The dispatcher's calm demeanor cracked slightly. Copy 419. Can you provide more details on the nature of the erratic behavior? Are they hostile? I watched as the figures slowly made their way onto the highway, forming a line across both lanes. They stood there, motionless again, blocking the road. The woman who'd first approached me remained closest, still pointing west, still smiling that terrible smile. Negative on hostile, but they're blocking traffic. Their behavior is, I can't explain it properly. They're not responding to commands, they're not communicating coherently. It's like they're all, I struggled for the right word, synchronized. Understood. Sergeant Hatch is en route from Price, ETA 20 minutes. Highway Patrol Unit 344 is coming from the east, ETA 12 minutes. I'm contacting County Sheriff for additional support. 20 minutes might as well have been 20 hours. I watched the figures standing in the road, all of them perfectly still now, and I understood with growing dread that this was connected to the disappearances. These people were the disappeared, and they were back, but they weren't right anymore. The woman's arms slowly lowered to her side. Her head turned, not smoothly, but in small jerking movements, until she was facing directly west again. Then, in perfect unison, all of the figures standing on the highway turned their heads in the same direction, and they started walking. Not toward me, not toward anything I could see. They simply walked west, moving down the center of the highway with that same awkward, marionette-like gait. The woman who'd approached me joined them, falling into line as if taking her predetermined place in a formation. I followed at a distance in my cruiser, emergency lights on, simultaneously trying to document what I was seeing and warn any approaching traffic. The figures didn't react to my presence, didn't respond to my spotlight or siren. They just kept walking, their pace steady and mechanical. Dispatch, subjects are mobile, proceeding westbound on I-70, speed approximately 2 miles per hour. I'm maintaining visual and attempting to redirect traffic. A semi-truck's lights appeared ahead, heading east toward us. I accelerated past the walking figures and positioned my cruiser diagonally across the westbound lanes, lights flashing. The truck slowed, the driver's confusion evident as his rig came to a stop. I jumped out and ran to the driver's side. He rolled down his window, a bearded man in his 50s looking annoyed. "What's going on, officer?" "I need you to stay in your vehicle. There are pedestrians on the highway, and we're in the process of clearing them." "Pedestrians? Out here?" He leaned forward, looking past me. "What the hell?" His voice trailed off as the line of figures walked past us, none of them turning their heads, none of them acknowledging our presence. In the truck's headlights, I could see them more clearly, men and women of various ages, all with that same gray pallor, those same black pool eyes, that same absent expression. "Jesus Christ," the trucker whispered. "What's wrong with them?" "Stay in your vehicle," I repeated, though I had no better answer than he did. The figures continued west, gradually disappearing back into the darkness beyond our lights. I stood there watching them go, every law enforcement instinct I had telling me to pursue, to contain, to control the situation. But something deeper, more primal, told me to let them go, to not follow them into the dark. Trooper 344 arrived 7 minutes later, his cruiser's lights cutting through the darkness from the east. I'd never been so relieved to see another patrol vehicle in my life. Mark Castellano stepped out, a 15-year veteran with a reputation for staying calm in bad situations. But even his weathered face showed confusion as I briefed him. "They just walked away?" he asked, scanning the empty highway with his flashlight. "Which direction?" "West. They've been walking for about 10 minutes now. Should be around mile marker 120, maybe 121. "How many again?" "I counted 19, but there could have been more I didn't see at first." Mark pulled out his radio. "Dispatch, 344 on scene with 419. We're going to proceed westbound and attempt to locate the pedestrian group. Confirm road closure is in effect. Affirmative 344. Road closure from mile marker 115 to 130. UDOT has been notified. Sheriff's deputies are establishing roadblocks at both ends. We got back in our vehicles and drove slowly west, our spotlights sweeping both sides of the highway. The desert landscape looked different now, threatening in a way it never had before. Every shadow seemed to hide something, every rock formation a potential place for people to emerge from. 419, you getting anything on your side? Mark's voice came through the radio. Negative, nothing visible. We continued for another 3 miles. Nothing. No figures walking, no shapes in the darkness, no trace of the 19 people who'd been on this road less than 15 minutes ago. "This doesn't make sense," Mark said when we finally stopped and got out to confer. "Even walking, they couldn't have gotten far enough to be out of sight. Not in this terrain." I thought about the boot print I'd found weeks earlier, the one that seemed wrong. I thought about Margaret Chen's car with the keys still in it, and James Pritchard's truck with the engine running. Mark, what if they didn't stay on the road? You mean they went into the desert? At night, moving like you described? They'd break ankles in the first 100 yards. I know it doesn't make sense. None of this makes sense. Sergeant Hatch arrived then, along with 2 county sheriff's deputies. We spent the next hour searching the area on foot, our flashlights dancing across the sagebrush and red rock. We found nothing. No footprints, no disturbances in the dirt, no signs that anyone had left the road. It was as if they'd evaporated. We gathered by our vehicles as dawn started painting the eastern sky pink and orange. Sergeant Hatch, a stocky man with gray hair and perpetual skepticism etched into his features, looked at each of us in turn. "All right, Reeves, walk me through it again, every detail." I did, starting with spotting the first woman and ending with watching them disappear into the darkness. As I spoke, I could see the doubt growing on Hatch's face, though he kept his expression neutral. "And the trucker?" he asked. "He saw them too?" "Yes, sir. I got his information. Eddie Garrison, drives for Werner. He saw the whole thing." "We'll need his statement." Hatch rubbed his face tiredly. "This is going to be a nightmare with the media. We've got dashcam footage?" My stomach sank. I don't know, sir. I was out of my vehicle for most of the encounter." "Check your footage. Castellano, yours too. Deputies, I want you to sweep the area again at first light. Look for any evidence of where these people went. Reeves, you're off duty as of now. Go home, write up your report, and don't talk to anyone about this. Media, family, friends, no one. Understood?" "Yes, sir." But as I drove back to my apartment in Price, exhaustion pulling at my bones, I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep. The woman's face kept appearing in my mind. Those black eyes, that mechanical smile, the flat way she'd said, "Help me," over and over. I spent the day reviewing my dashcam footage. Most of it was exactly as I remembered, but there was something strange about it. When the woman first appeared in my headlights, there was a brief moment, maybe half a second, where the video glitched. Static lines rolled across the screen, and when they cleared, she was there. I played it back a dozen times, trying to convince myself it was just a technical issue. But each time I watched it, the timing seemed too perfect. The footage of the other figures was worse. Every time my camera panned across the line of people standing on the highway, there was interference. Not constant, but flickering, like the camera was struggling to process what it was seeing. In some frames, the figures were clear. In others, they seemed to blur and distort, their outlines becoming indistinct. I burned a copy of the footage onto a drive and tried to sleep, managing maybe 3 hours of restless unconsciousness filled with dreams of people with black eyes standing in endless rows along a dark highway. My phone woke me at 2 p.m. It was Mark Castellano. "You need to come back in," he said without preamble. "They found something." 40 minutes later, I was standing in a small clearing about a quarter mile south of mile marker 121. A sheriff's deputy had discovered it during the morning sweep, a circle of disturbed earth, approximately 30 feet in diameter. The soil had been scraped clean, every plant removed, every rock pushed to the edges. In the center of the circle was a pattern made from small stones, arranged in a design that hurt to look at. The stones formed a spiral, but it doubled back on itself in ways that seemed geometrically impossible, creating angles that my eyes couldn't quite follow. "Don't stare at it too long," one of the deputies warned. "Makes you feel sick." He was right. After a few seconds of trying to trace the pattern, I felt nauseous and had to look away. "There are 3 more of these," Hatch said, appearing beside me, "all within a mile of this location, all identical." "What are they?" "That's what everyone keeps asking me. I was hoping you might have an idea." I shook my head. I've never seen anything like it. Neither has anyone else. I've got calls in to the university, see if any of their archaeology people recognize it. In the meantime, we've got a bigger problem. He led me back to the vehicles, where a laptop sat open on the hood of his cruiser. On the screen was a map of eastern Utah, dotted with colored pins. "Red pins are the abandoned vehicles," Hatch explained. 6 total, all in the past month. "Blue pins are these stone circles we found today. Green pins are," he hesitated, "these are sightings." "Sightings of what?" "People matching the description you gave. Reports going back 3 weeks. Mostly truckers, couple of motorists. All of them reported seeing individuals standing alongside the highway at night. Most dismissed it, figured they were seeing things. A few called it in, but by the time anyone got there, the people were gone." I studied the map. The sightings formed a pattern, clustering around the same stretch of highway where I'd encountered the group. "Has anyone else seen them moving like I did, walking together?" "Not that I know of. You might be the first person to see them active." "Active?" I repeated. "That's one word for it." "Reeves, I'm going to be straight with you. The brass is worried about panic. We've got unexplained disappearances, strange sightings, and now some kind of ritualistic markings in the desert. If this gets out, we'll have every conspiracy theorist and paranormal investigator in the country flooding this area. What about the people who are missing? Margaret Chen, James Pritchard, the others? We're still investigating. But between you and me, I don't think we're going to find them. At least, not the way they were. The implication hung in the air between us. You think those people I saw were the missing persons? I think it's a possibility we need to consider. The timing fits, the locations fit, and if that woman you encountered was Margaret Chen." He trailed off, pulling up a photo on his phone. "This is her driver's license photo." I looked at the picture. Asian woman, 34 years old, shoulder-length black hair, bright smile. It could have been the woman I'd seen. Strip away the warmth from the expression, drain the color from the skin, replace the normal eyes with those horrible black pools. And yes, it could have been her. "I can't say for certain," I admitted. "I know, but we're going to need you to work with a sketch artist, see if we can get detailed descriptions of any of the others you saw. Maybe we can match them to the missing persons reports." Over the next few days, I spent hours with a forensic artist, describing every face I could remember from that night. It was harder than I expected. The figures had seemed so uniform in my memory, so identical in their emptiness. But as I focused, details emerged. A man with a gray beard, a younger woman with a distinctive nose, a teenage boy with acne scars. The artist worked patiently, adjusting and refining until I nodded in confirmation. When we were done, we had sketches of 7 individuals. Hatch took them away to compare against missing persons databases. He called me that evening. 5 matches. 5 definite matches to people who've disappeared in this area in the past 8 months.
The other 2 we're still checking, but I'm betting we'll find them too. So they're alive. Whatever's happened to them, they're alive. Are they? Hatch's voice was grim. You saw them, Reeves. Would you call that alive? I didn't have an answer. The media attention intensified. Despite our best efforts to keep details quiet, leaks happened. A Salt Lake City news station ran a story about mysterious disappearances along the I-70 corridor. Then a true crime podcast picked it up. By the end of the week, we had reporters camped out in Green River and Salina, interviewing anyone who'd driven through the area. And then the copycat sightings started. People began reporting seeing figures along the highway, even during the day. Most were obvious fabrications, attention seekers trying to get on TV. But some were harder to dismiss. A family from Nevada showed me photos they'd taken from their car, grainy images of what looked like people standing in the distance. A long-haul trucker submitted dashcam footage that showed a figure by the roadside for just a few seconds before it disappeared. The problem was I couldn't tell which reports were real and which weren't. My own experience had been so surreal that almost anything seemed possible now. On November 3rd, 6 days after my encounter, I was back on patrol. Hatch had wanted to keep me off duty longer, but we were short-staffed, and I'd argued that sitting at home was worse than working. At least on patrol, I felt like I was doing something. It was a clear night, cold enough that frost was forming on my windshield. I was heading east, approaching mile marker 125, when my radio came alive with static. Not the normal crackle, this was different, a pulsing interference that rose and fell in waves. Dispatch, this is 419. Anyone else experiencing radio interference? No response. Just that pulsing static. I tried again. Dispatch, 419. Radio check. Nothing.
My headlights caught something on the shoulder ahead. I slowed, my pulse quickening. It was a vehicle, a newer model Subaru Outback, pulled cleanly onto the shoulder, hazard lights blinking. Not again, I muttered, pulling up behind it. I tried the radio once more. Still just static. My cell phone showed no signal, which wasn't unusual out here, but the timing made me uneasy. I was alone, potentially cut off from communication, approaching another abandoned vehicle. Every instinct told me to wait for backup. But backup might not come if I couldn't call for it. And if someone was injured, waiting could mean the difference between life and death. I approached the Subaru carefully, flashlight in one hand, other hand on my weapon. The driver's door was closed. As I got closer, I could see someone sitting in the driver's seat. I tapped on the window. "Highway Patrol, are you all right?" The figure didn't move. Through the glass, I could see it was a man, maybe 40 years old, hands on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. I tried the door. Unlocked. I opened it slowly. "Sir, I'm Trooper Reeves with the Highway Patrol. Are you injured?" The interior light came on, and I saw him clearly. His eyes were open but unfocused, staring at nothing. His skin had that same gray pallor I'd seen before. He sat rigid, unmoving, barely breathing. "Sir, can you hear me?" I reached out to check his pulse. The moment my fingers touched his wrist, his head snapped toward me. His eyes were wrong, not black like the others, but getting there, the pupils expanding even as I watched. His mouth opened, and that awful humming sound emerged, resonating in the small space of the car. I jerked back, stumbling away from the vehicle. The man's head slowly rotated back to forward. He removed his hands from the steering wheel with mechanical precision and reached for the door. I should have stopped him. I should have called out, tried to help. But I was frozen, watching as he stepped out of his car and stood on the shoulder, facing west. His mouth was still open, that humming continuing, and now I could hear something else beneath it, words maybe, or something trying to be words, but pitched too low and too resonant to be human speech. Other sounds joined in. I spun around, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, and my blood turned to ice. They were back. The figures, dozens of them, emerging from the darkness on both sides of the highway, all of them facing west, all of them humming that same terrible sound that seemed to vibrate in my chest cavity. And they were walking, not toward me this time, but across the highway, moving from the south side to the north, all in the same direction, all with that same jerky marionette gait. The man from the Subaru joined them, falling into step with the procession. I watched, paralyzed, as the line of figures disappeared into the desert, heading north. Toward what? I ran back to my cruiser, trying my radio again. Still static. I grabbed my personal cell phone and drove east, away from the scene, until I finally got a single bar of signal. My hands shook as I dialed Hatch's number. "They're back," I said when he answered. "Mile marker 125, dozens of them." "And Hatch, they're not walking along the road this time. They're leaving it, heading north into the desert." "Stay where you are," he ordered. "I'm coming to you. Do not follow them. Do not approach them. Just wait." But as I sat there in my cruiser, watching the procession of figures disappear into the darkness, I knew that waiting wasn't going to be enough. Whatever was happening out there in the desert, it was building towards something, and we were running out of time to stop it. By dawn, we had assembled what could only be described as a small task force. Hatch had called in every available trooper, along with sheriff's deputies from 3 counties, search and rescue volunteers, and even a couple of National Guard units that happened to be training nearby. We gathered at a truck stop in Green River, the parking lot filled with patrol vehicles, SUVs, and military Humvees. The plan was simple: follow the trail the figures had taken and find out where they were going. A search and rescue tracker named Maria Gonzalez had arrived before sunrise and spent 2 hours following the route north from mile marker 125. She stood now in front of a topographic map, pointing to a location about 8 miles into the desert. "The tracks lead here," she said, tapping a spot on the map. "It's called the San Rafael Swell, a geological formation with a lot of canyons and wash areas. Problem is, the tracks just stop." "Stop how?" Hatch asked. "They reach this canyon rim, then disappear. No signs of descent, no indication they turned around. It's like they walked to the edge and vanished." I studied the map. The area she'd marked was remote even by Utah standards, a maze of sandstone canyons and slot washes that had barely been mapped. Cell service would be non-existent, and the terrain would make vehicle access nearly impossible. "We'll need to go in on foot," said Captain Pierce from the National Guard, a tall man with close-cropped hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. "I can provide 12 personnel, but I need to be clear about what we're walking into. What exactly are we dealing with here?" Hatch looked at me. I was the only one who'd had extended contact with the affected individuals. All eyes turned my direction. "They're people," I said carefully. "Or they were. Something's happened to them, I don't know what. They're not violent, at least not that I've seen, but they're not right. They don't respond to communication, they don't seem to feel pain or cold, and they move with purpose towards specific locations." "You think they're drugged?" Pierce asked. "I don't know what I think, but whatever's affecting them, it's spreading. The man I saw last night had normal eyes when I first approached his vehicle. By the time he got out of the car, they were changing. This happens fast." A deputy I didn't know spoke up. "What about the stone circles? Do we think they're connected?" "Has to be," Maria said. "I found 2 more this morning, both along the route the figures took. Same design, same precise construction." Hatch made a decision. "We go in. 2 teams, one following the trail Maria found, one staying mobile on the highway in case more individuals appear. Reeves, you're with the ground team. I want you there since you've had the most contact. Sir, with respect, shouldn't I stay on the highway? If they appear again." "That's exactly why I want you on the ground team. You know what to look for. You've seen how they behave. That makes you our best asset." I wanted to argue, but he was right. As much as the thought of hiking into that desert terrified me, I was probably the most qualified person to identify and interact with the affected individuals if we found them. We set out an hour later. Our group consisted of me, 3 other troopers, 4 National Guard soldiers, 2 sheriff's deputies, and Maria as our guide. We carried basic supplies, medical equipment, and enough communication gear to hopefully maintain contact with the base team despite the terrain. The November sun was deceptively warm as we hiked into the desert, but I knew from experience how quickly that would change once it set. We followed Maria's markers, small flags she'd placed every 100 yards or so, across terrain that grew increasingly difficult. The ground rose and fell in waves, cut through by dry washes and dotted with juniper and sagebrush. After 2 hours of hiking, we reached the area where Maria had lost the trail. It was a canyon rim overlooking a deep gorge carved by millennia of water erosion. The sandstone walls dropped maybe 200 feet to a boulder-strewn floor below. "This is where the tracks end," Maria said, pointing to the ground. "You can see them clearly, leading right up to the edge, and then nothing." I looked down into the canyon. The walls were nearly vertical. There was no way anyone could have descended without climbing gear, and certainly not the dozens of people I'd seen walking with that awkward, uncoordinated gait. One of the soldiers, a young woman named Specialist Chen, was scanning the area with binoculars. "Sir, you should see this." She handed the binoculars to Captain Pierce, who looked, then immediately passed them to me. "Reeves, is this what I think it is?" I adjusted the focus and looked where she'd been pointing. About a quarter mile to the east, on a flat section of canyon floor, I could see figures. Dozens of them, maybe more, all standing in formation. They were arranged in concentric circles around something at the center, but I was too far away to see what. "That's them," I confirmed. "That's what they look like." "How the hell did they get down there?" Pierce asked. Nobody had an answer. We spent the next hour finding a route down, a treacherous descent along a crack in the canyon wall that required us to rope up and belay each other down the steepest sections. By the time we reached the canyon floor, the sun was past its zenith, and long shadows were starting to creep across the sandstone. We approached the gathering carefully, spreading out to avoid presenting a clustered target if things went wrong. As we got closer, details emerged that made my skin crawl. There were at least 60 people standing in those circles, maybe more. All of them faced inward, toward the center, where a larger stone pattern had been constructed, similar to the ones we'd found before, but vastly more complex. This one covered an area about 50 feet across, the stones arranged in interlocking spirals that seemed to shift and change the longer I looked at them. "Don't stare at the pattern," I warned the others, remembering how it had made me feel before. We were within 50 yards now. None of the figures had moved or acknowledged our presence. They just stood there, that same blank expression on all their faces, eyes fixed on the stone pattern at the center. "This is Captain Pierce, Utah National Guard," Pierce called out, his voice echoing off the canyon walls. "We're here to help you. If you can hear me, please respond." Nothing. Not even a twitch. "We need to identify them," Hatch's voice crackled over the radio. "Get photos if you can. See if any match our missing persons." I moved closer, camera ready, photographing faces. Some I recognized from the previous encounter. Others were new. All of them had those same black pool eyes, that same gray pallor to their skin. But there was something else I noticed now that I hadn't before. A slight luminescence to their eyes, like they were lit from within by some dim, cold light. "Jesus," one of the deputies muttered, "what happened to these people?" As if in response to his question, all 60-plus heads turned in unison to face us. The movement was so sudden, so synchronized, that several of us jumped back. But they didn't approach. They just stared at us with those horrible eyes, and then, as one, they began to hum. It was the same sound I'd heard before, but multiplied by 60 voices, it was overwhelming. The vibration rattled my rib cage, made my vision blur. The soldiers raised their weapons instinctively, though what good guns would do against this, I had no idea. "Hold fire," Pierce shouted. "They're not threatening us." "Everyone, hold position." The humming continued for maybe 30 seconds, rising in pitch and volume until it was almost unbearable. Then it stopped, and in the silence that followed, one of the figures stepped forward. It was a woman, maybe 50 years old, wearing clothes that were tattered and dusty. She walked with that same mechanical gait until she was about 10 feet from me, then stopped. Her mouth opened, and when she spoke, her voice had that same flat, affectless quality I'd heard before. "You should not be here." Finally, communication. I stepped forward, ignoring the worried looks from the others. "We're here to help. Can you tell us what's happening? Are you hurt?" "Help." She seemed to consider the word. "No. No help. Too late for help." "It's not too late. Whatever's happened, we can—" "Transformation," she interrupted. "Required. Must be ready. Must be open. Must be empty." "Empty of what? I don't understand." Her head tilted to the side in that disturbing, jerky motion. "You will. Soon. All will. The door opens. They return. We must be ready to receive them." Behind her, the other figures began to move. Not toward us, but repositioning, adjusting their formation around the stone pattern. As they moved, I realized they were forming a specific shape, a symbol that looked almost like a star, but with too many points, branches that curved in impossible directions. "Who's returning?" I asked the woman. "What door?" But she was no longer looking at me. Her attention had shifted to the sky, to the east, where the first stars were becoming visible as dusk approached. "Soon," she said. "Tonight. Convergence." Then she turned and walked back to join the others, taking her place in the formation. All of them stood perfectly still once more, faces tilted upward toward the darkening sky. "We need to get out of here," Maria said quietly. "Right now." Pierce was already on the radio. "Base, this is ground team. We've located approximately 60 individuals in a canyon formation. They're exhibiting extreme altered mental status and making statements about some kind of event occurring tonight, requesting immediate extraction and additional resources." The radio crackled with interference, that same pulsing static I'd heard before. Hatch's voice came through broken and distorted. "Ground, copy, extraction, impossible, storm." Storm? I looked at the sky. It was clear, not a cloud visible. But then I noticed something odd. The stars that were appearing seemed wrong somehow. There were too many of them, and they seemed to be moving, shifting position in ways that stars shouldn't move. "Is anyone else seeing that?" Specialist Chen asked, pointing upward. "The stars?" We all looked up. The movement was subtle but unmistakable. The constellations were distorting, as if the fabric of the sky itself was rippling like water. "That's not possible," one of the deputies said. But it was happening. And as full darkness fell over the canyon, the effect became more pronounced. The stars seemed to be swirling, gathering, converging on a point directly above us. The air itself felt different, charged, like before a lightning strike, but cold, so cold that our breath began to fog despite the mild temperature. The figures in the canyon began humming again, but this time it wasn't the chaotic sound from before. This was coordinated, harmonic, creating a resonance that seemed to pull at something deep inside my chest. The stone pattern at the center began to glow, not with reflected light, but with its own illumination. A sickly green-blue radiance that cast everything in an otherworldly glow. "We need to move now," Pierce ordered. "Back to the rope. Everyone move." But as we turned to retreat, we saw them. More figures, dozens of them, emerging from the darkness at the far end of the canyon. They walked toward us with that same purposeful gait, blocking our escape route. "Sir, we're cut off," one of the soldiers reported. Pierce assessed the situation quickly. Defensive positions. Non-lethal force only unless directly threatened. These are civilians, remember that. We formed a loose circle, backs to each other, as the new arrivals joined the formation in the canyon. There had to be over 100 people now, all standing in that precise pattern, all humming, all staring at the sky where the stars continued their impossible dance. The glow from the stone pattern intensified. I could feel it now, not just see it, a pulling sensation, like gravity working in reverse, trying to lift me up. Around me, I heard the others gasping, fighting the same sensation. "What is this?" Chen shouted over the humming. "What's happening?" And then, directly above us, the sky opened. I don't have better words for it. One moment, there were stars, swirling and dancing. The next, there was something else, a darkness that was somehow darker than the night itself, a void that hurt to look at because my eyes kept trying to find depth where there was none. It wasn't a hole in the sky exactly, more like the sky had been peeled back to reveal what lay beneath. And things were coming through. At first, I thought they were lights, distant, cold lights descending from that impossible opening. But as they got closer, I realized they weren't lights at all. They were shapes, forms, entities that my brain couldn't quite process. They seemed to flicker between being solid and being made of light, between having definite shapes and being formless clouds of something that wasn't quite matter. The humming from the figures reached a crescendo, and the woman who'd spoken to us earlier raised her arms above her head. All around the formation, others did the same, a wave of motion rippling through the crowd. "They're opening themselves," Maria whispered beside me. "Whatever those things are, these people are trying to let them in." She was right. As the descending entities drew closer, I could see threads of that cold light reaching down from them, extending toward the upraised hands of the people below. When the threads made contact, the people began to convulse, their bodies rigid, mouths open in silent screams. But they weren't screaming in pain. As the light poured into them, their expressions shifted from blank emptiness to something worse, a kind of terrible rapture, an ecstasy that looked wrong on human faces. "Open fire!" someone shouted. I don't even know who. But Pierce countermanded it immediately. "Negative! Hold your fire! We don't know what shooting those things might do." One of the entities drifted closer to our group. Up close, I could see that it had a structure, though my eyes couldn't hold on to the details. It was roughly humanoid, but stretched, elongated, with too many limbs, or maybe not enough. Its face, if it had one, was a blank surface that somehow still managed to convey attention, awareness, intelligence of a kind that was utterly alien. It reached toward me with something that might have been a hand. The air around it shimmered and warped, and I felt that pulling sensation intensify, like it was trying to draw something out of me, not my body, but something deeper. Something essential. I stumbled backward, and Specialist Chen pulled me away. "Don't let it touch you." But one of the deputies wasn't fast enough. The entity's appendage brushed against his arm, and he froze instantly. His eyes went wide, then wider, pupils dilating until they were solid black. His mouth opened, and that humming sound emerged from his throat. "Davis!" his partner shouted, grabbing him. But Davis didn't respond. He shook off the other deputy's grip with surprising strength and walked calmly toward the formation, taking his place among the others.
"Fall back!" Pierce ordered. "Everyone to the north wall, now!" We retreated, but more entities were descending, and more people were joining the formation. I saw a trucker I'd passed on the highway earlier that day. I saw a woman who'd been working at the Green River gas station. They walked into the canyon from all directions, drawn by something we couldn't see, compelled by forces we didn't understand. We pressed ourselves against the canyon wall, watching helplessly as the transformation spread. The entities continued to descend, dozens of them now, each one connecting to multiple people through those threads of cold light. The canyon had become a nightmare tableau, hundreds of people standing in precise formation, bodies rigid, faces turned upward in that terrible rapture as something incomprehensible poured into them. "We can't stop this," Maria said, her voice hollow. "There's too many. Whatever this is, it's too big." But I couldn't accept that. Somewhere in that crowd were Margaret Chen, James Pritchard, and dozens of other people who'd been living normal lives before something reached out and claimed them. They deserved better than to be abandoned to whatever fate awaited them here. I looked around desperately, trying to think. The stone pattern at the center was the focus point. The entities were descending toward it, using it as some kind of anchor or gateway. What if we disrupt it? "The stones," I said, grabbing Pierce's arm. "The pattern in the center. What if we destroy it?" "How?" "We'd have to get through all of them, and I'm not willing to shoot civilians to do it." "We don't have to shoot anyone. We just need a distraction." Before anyone could stop me, I pulled out my flashlight and flare gun, standard equipment we'd brought for the search. I fired the flare straight up into the air, where it exploded in brilliant red light, momentarily illuminating the entire canyon in crimson. The effect was immediate. Every head in the formation turned toward the light, and for just a moment, the humming faltered. The entities paused in their descent, their attention shifting. "Now!" I shouted and ran. It was the stupidest thing I'd ever done, sprinting across open ground toward the center of that alien gathering. But the distraction worked. The people in the formation didn't move to stop me, still entranced by the flare's light. I reached the stone pattern and began kicking at it, scattering rocks, disrupting the precise arrangement. The moment I disturbed the first stone, the humming turned to a shriek. Not from the people, from the entities themselves. The sound was like metal tearing, like ice cracking, like something fundamental breaking. The cold light that had been pouring down flickered and dimmed. The entities began to withdraw, pulling back toward that darkness above. But they weren't going quietly. As they retreated, the threads connecting them to the people below yanked tight, and I watched in horror as some of those people began to lift off the ground, being pulled upward by the entities they'd bonded with. "No!" I kept kicking at the stones, destroying the pattern as fast as I could. Others from my team had followed my lead, and together we dismantled the carefully constructed design, scattering stones in all directions. The shrieking intensified, becoming almost unbearable. More people were being lifted into the air now, a dozen, 2 dozen, their bodies limp as they rose toward that terrible darkness. But others were being released, the threads of light dissipating, those people collapsing to the ground. The opening in the sky began to close or fold back in on itself. Again, I lack the words to properly describe it. The darkness contracted, pulling the ascending people and entities with it. I watched Margaret Chen rise past me, her black eyes meeting mine for just a moment. Was there recognition there? Awareness? Or was she already too far gone? Then she was gone, pulled into the closing void along with perhaps 30 others. The darkness sealed itself with a sound like thunder played in reverse, and suddenly we were standing in a normal desert canyon under normal stars, surrounded by unconscious people and the ruins of an impossible ritual. For several seconds, nobody moved. We stood in shock, trying to process what we'd just witnessed. Then training kicked in, and we started checking the people on the ground for vital signs. Most were alive but unconscious, their breathing shallow, pupils still dilated but slowly returning to normal. A few were coherent enough to speak, though what they said was largely incoherent,
Fragments about voices, about doors, about something vast and hungry that had touched their minds. Deputy Davis was among the survivors. When he came to, he looked at me with normal human eyes and started crying. "What happened to me?" he asked. I remember wanting it. Wanting to be empty so something else could fill me up. God, what was that thing? "I don't know," I told him honestly, "but it's gone now." But was it? As we waited for rescue helicopters to arrive, our radios suddenly working again once the void closed, I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd interrupted something rather than stopped it. Those people who'd been pulled through, where were they now? And would whatever we'd seen try to return? The aftermath was chaotic. The rescue operation took all night, with helicopters ferrying out the unconscious people in shifts. The media descended in force, but the official story was carefully controlled. Mass hallucination from contaminated water, possibly from illegal dumping in the area. The videos and photos people had taken mysteriously corrupted or failed to capture the entities clearly. I knew it was a cover-up, but I also understood why. How do you explain to the world what we'd seen without causing mass panic? How do you tell people that the sky can open and things can come through? Things that want to hollow out human beings and wear them like suits? The survivors were quarantined for observation. Most recovered physically within a few days, though psychologically the damage was severe. They all described similar experiences, a feeling of being opened, of something vast and alien touching their consciousness, filling them with knowledge and purpose that humans weren't meant to contain. A few never recovered. They remained catatonic, eyes open but unseeing, occasionally humming that terrible sound. The official diagnosis was catatonic schizophrenia brought on by trauma. I visited one of them, a young man named Trevor who'd been a college student traveling through Utah. He sat in his hospital bed, staring at nothing, and sometimes his lips would move, forming words too quiet to hear. I leaned in close once, trying to catch what he was saying. When I finally made it out, I wished I hadn't. "They're still here," he whispered. "They're still here. They're always here. Just waiting. Just waiting for the next door to open." The 30 people who'd been pulled through that darkness were never found. Search teams combed the area for weeks, but there was no trace of them. They were classified as missing, their families left with no bodies to bury, no closure to find. The stone circles were documented and destroyed. Analysis showed they were made from ordinary local stones, arranged in patterns that seemed to hurt anyone who studied them too closely. Anthropologists and archaeologists couldn't agree on their origin or meaning. Some claimed they resembled ancient symbols from cultures around the world. Others insisted they were wholly unique. All agreed they shouldn't exist. As for me, I requested a transfer. I couldn't patrol that highway anymore, not knowing what I knew. Every time I passed mile marker 119 or 125 or any of the spots where this all began, I'd remember. I'd see those figures standing in the darkness. I'd see that void opening in the sky. But the transfer was denied. "You have experience with this phenomenon," my supervisor explained. "If it happens again, we need someone who knows what to look for." If it happens again. Not a question of whether, but when. That was 3 years ago. I still work the I-70 corridor, still patrol those empty miles of desert highway. And I watch. I watch for abandoned vehicles with the keys still in the ignition. I watch for figures standing alongside the road. I watch the sky on clear nights, looking for stars that move in ways they shouldn't. Because Trevor was right. They're still here. I can feel them sometimes, especially on quiet nights when I'm alone on patrol. It's like a pressure at the edge of my awareness, a presence that's always watching, always waiting. The official investigation concluded with a report full of technical jargon that explained nothing. Mass psychogenic illness potentially triggered by environmental factors. But I have a copy of an unofficial report, one that never saw public release, written by a researcher from a government agency I'd never heard of. It said that the phenomenon we witnessed had been documented before, in different forms, in different locations around the world. Remote areas where people disappeared. Places where the locals whispered about thin spots, or doors, or crossings. The report suggested that Earth has always been permeable in certain locations, under certain conditions, and that something on the other side has been aware of us for a very, very long time. The report ended with a chilling observation. The frequency of these incidents has been increasing. What were once isolated events separated by decades now occur every few years.
And each time, the entities get closer. Their influence spreads wider. The doors stay open longer. I think about Margaret Chen sometimes, wonder what happened to her after she was pulled through. Is she still alive in any meaningful sense? Is she trapped somewhere, still aware but unable to escape? Or did she become something else entirely, transformed into one of those entities that descended from the darkness? I'll never know. But I do know this. Whatever we faced in that canyon, it wasn't the first time it happened, and it won't be the last. Last week, I responded to another abandoned vehicle. A rental car, pulled neatly onto the shoulder, keys in the ignition. The driver, a tourist from Germany, was gone without a trace. No footprints, no signs of struggle, just an empty car and that familiar feeling of wrongness that prickles the back of my neck. I documented everything, called it in, followed procedure. But before the tow truck arrived, I noticed something in the dirt beside the car. Not a footprint this time, but stones. Just 3 of them, arranged in a small triangular pattern. When I looked at them, trying to discern if they were deliberately placed, my vision blurred and my stomach churned. I scattered those stones immediately, ground them into the dirt with my boot heel. Then I stood there in the desert silence, listening to the wind and feeling watched by something I couldn't see. The desert has a way of making you feel small. But now I know it's not just the vastness of the landscape that creates that feeling. It's the awareness of how thin the barrier is between our world and something else. It's knowing that we're not alone, and that what shares this space with us doesn't think or feel or want the same things we do. I still work the night shift, still patrol that lonely stretch of highway. Someone has to. Someone has to watch for the signs, be ready when it happens again. Because it will happen again. Maybe not tonight, maybe not this month. But eventually, someone will pull over on an empty stretch of road and feel that pull, that call to become empty, to be filled with something vast and terrible. And when they do, I'll be there. Not because I can stop it, I don't think anyone can truly stop it, but because someone needs to bear witness. Someone needs to remember the people who disappear, to document what's happening, to sound the alarm even if no one wants to listen. Sometimes, late at night when I'm alone on patrol, I catch myself humming. Just for a second, just a few notes before I realize what I'm doing and force myself to stop. The melody is always the same, that resonant, harmonic sound I heard in the canyon. It's like it left an echo in my mind, a fragment of whatever touched all those people. I wonder sometimes if I was affected more than I realize. If maybe I'm already changing, slowly, imperceptibly. If one day I'll pull my patrol car over on some empty stretch of highway, step out, and start walking west towards something only I can see. But until that day comes, if it comes, I keep working. I keep watching. I keep a record of everything I see, everything I experience, in a journal I keep locked in my apartment. If I disappear, maybe someone will find it. Maybe they'll understand what's happening out here in the empty places. The desert keeps its secrets, the old-timers used to say. But they were wrong. The desert doesn't keep secrets. It reveals them, slowly, to those who watch long enough. And the secret is this: the world is stranger and more terrible than we ever imagined. There are gaps in reality, places where something else bleeds through. And in those gaps, something waits, patient, persistent, and hungry for whatever makes us human. I think about Trevor's words often. They're still here. They're always here. He's right. I know he's right. And knowing that, understanding that, is a burden I carry every day.
But someone has to carry it. Someone has to stand watch on those lonely highways, under those vast desert skies, and remember that we're not alone, even if we wish we were. Last night, I was parked at mile marker 119, filing paperwork in my patrol car. It was just past 2 a.m., dead quiet, the kind of silence that feels heavy. I glanced up at the rearview mirror and saw something that made my blood run cold. Standing about 50 yards behind my car was a figure, just standing there, motionless, facing my direction. Even from that distance, even in the darkness, I could see the way they stood, too still, too rigid. I grabbed my flashlight and got out of my car. "Highway Patrol," I called out. "Do you need assistance?" The figure didn't respond, didn't move, just stood there. I started walking toward them, every instinct screaming at me to get back in my car and drive away. But this is my job. This is what I do. As I got closer, my flashlight beam finally reached them. It was a young woman, maybe 25, with blonde hair and empty black eyes. She was wearing hiking clothes, a small backpack still strapped to her shoulders. "Ma'am," I said, keeping my distance this time, "can you tell me your name?" Her mouth opened slowly. And then she spoke, in that flat, emotionless voice I've come to dread. "It's starting again," she said. "The door is opening. We need to be ready. We need to be empty." She raised her arm, pointing west, just like that first woman had 3 years ago. And behind her, emerging from the darkness, I saw them. More figures, dozens of them, all walking with that terrible mechanical gait, all heading in the same direction. I'm in my car now, watching them pass, documenting everything while I wait for backup that might not arrive in time. They've been walking for 20 minutes, an endless procession of hollow people moving towards something I can't see. The sky above is clear, but I keep checking it anyway, watching for stars that move wrong, for darkness that's darker than night should be. Because Trevor was right. They're still here. They're always here. And I'm beginning to think they're winning.